Autumn Reynolds locks eyes with Jackson Montgomery across the gala ballroom, her gaze sharp as glass. Their rivalry is well known. She's the fierce attorney defending Boston's black neighborhoods, he's the tech mogul with a charm as dangerous as his development plans. Their barbed exchange is interrupted when Jackson's father suddenly collapses. Instinct takes over, and Autumn rushes to help. Her training kicks in as she performs CPR, guiding Jackson through the chaos. In those tense minutes, the mask of animosity slips, but only slightly. As paramedics arrive, Warren Montgomery's wallet falls to the floor. Jackson picks it up, but not before Autumn sees the photo peeking out, Warren, decades younger, standing beside a man she knows too well. Her father. The father she lost at 7. The one whose name her mother rarely speaks. Autumn steps back, shaken. What was her father doing in a photo with the patriarch of a family her own has always avoided? Jackson sees the shift in her eyes but misunderstands it. He doesn't know the ground has just shifted beneath her feet. Sometimes, the people we're taught to fight are part of the past we never knew we had. And sometimes, a photo is more than a memory, it's the beginning of a truth that changes everything. Welcome back, love seekers. For those joining us for the first time, I'm your guide through the complicated maze of the heart. Here at Dear Love Diaries, we believe every relationship has a story worth telling, especially the ones that begin in the most unexpected ways. You know those moments in life when you're absolutely certain about something? When you've made up your mind about a person and nothing could possibly change it? We've all been there. We meet someone, we decide who they are based on limited information, and we file them away in our minds: competitor, enemy, obstacle. But what happens when life forces us to look deeper? That's what today's story explores. The thin line between hatred and attraction, between judgment and understanding. It asks us to consider how often we miss connections because we're too busy defending ourselves against perceived threats. How many potential loves have we walked away from because we were afraid of what they might reveal about ourselves? Autumn and Jackson's journey isn't just about two people falling in love despite their differences. It's about two people discovering that their differences aren't what they seemed at all. It's about the secrets families keep and the ways those secrets shape us, even when we don't know they exist. Today's story asks, what happens when the person you've sworn to hate becomes the one you can't live without? What happens when your enemy turns out to be the missing piece of your own puzzle? I think we're drawn to stories like this because they remind us of life's beautiful complexity. They challenge us to question our assumptions, about others and about ourselves. They give us permission to change our minds, to be wrong, to discover that the world is bigger and more connected than we ever imagined. As we follow Autumn and Jackson through their journey from bitter rivals to unlikely allies to something deeper and more profound, I invite you to think about the judgments you've made in your own life. The people you've dismissed. The connections you might have missed because you thought you already knew the whole story. Because that's what love often does, it arrives disguised as something else entirely. It challenges us. It disrupts our carefully constructed narratives. And if we're brave enough to let it, it transforms us in ways we never thought possible. Where in the world are you watching from today? It always blows me away how these stories connect us across cities, countries, even continents. Drop your location in the comments so we can see just how far this community reaches. And before we dive in, do yourself a favor. Grab a warm drink, get comfy, and settle in. This story's got some real heart, you might feel it more than you expect. Now, let's begin with Autumn Reynolds, a woman who has built her life on certainty, structure, and keeping people at arm's length. A woman who's about to discover that the lines between personal and professional, between past and present, between hatred and love, are far more blurry than she ever imagined. The 5:30 a.m. alarm cuts through Autumn Reynolds' dreams like a surgical strike. She's awake before the second beep, already mentally reviewing the day ahead as she slides her feet into the slippers beside her bed. The Cambridge apartment is quiet, modern, and meticulously organized, much like its owner. Black and white photographs of cityscape architecture line the hallway as she makes her way to the kitchen, each one precisely level with its neighbors. She measures coffee beans with the same attention to detail she applies to legal briefs, the warm scent filling her kitchen as she reviews case notes on her tablet. Autumn doesn't believe in wasting time, not even these pre-dawn moments before the rest of Boston stirs to life. Time, after all, is the one resource even her mother's money couldn't buy more of. 43% of defendants with minority-sounding names received higher bail requirements, she mutters, highlighting the statistic for later use. Her upcoming case against Montgomery Enterprises isn't just another corporate battle, it's personal in ways that go beyond professional rivalry. As sunlight begins to filter through her blinds, Autumn catches sight of the single photo on her refrigerator, herself at age 6, sitting on her father's shoulders at Boston Common. His warm brown skin a shade darker than hers, his brilliant smile a memory she clings to even as it fades. Dr. James Reynolds, brilliant architect turned MIT professor, dead from a heart condition before Autumn's 8th birthday. Her mother never remarried. Dr. Vanessa Whitehill Reynolds threw herself into her cardiothoracic surgery practice with the fierce dedication of a woman running from grief. She raised Autumn with high expectations and limited affection, surgeons' hands that could repair hearts but struggled to hold one. Excellence isn't optional, Autumn, her mother would say. Especially not for women who look like us. The world won't give you second chances. The memory is interrupted by her phone buzzing with her mother's daily check-in text, early court today? Don't forget protein. Yogurt isn't enough. Autumn smiles despite herself. Her mother's love language, pragmatic care disguised as criticism. She texts back a simple, got it. Dinner Sunday, before slipping into her charcoal suit, armor for the battle ahead. By 7:30, she's at Reynolds Law in downtown Boston, reviewing the community impact statement for the Roxbury development case. Montgomery Enterprises wants to revitalize historically black neighborhood, corporate speak for gentrification that would displace families who've lived there for generations. Not if Autumn has anything to say about it. The Montgomery file just updated, her assistant says, placing a folder on her immaculate desk. They've brought in new partners for the Roxbury project. Some tech startup called EquiHome. Autumn frowns. Send me everything we have on them. I want to know who's running it, what their angle is, and how they're connected to Montgomery. 3 hours later, the answer appears on her computer screen: Jackson Montgomery, son of Warren Montgomery, founder of EquiHome Technologies. The same Jackson Montgomery whose reputation for disruptive innovation makes him a darling of Boston's tech scene. The same Jackson Montgomery she's systematically outmaneuvered in 3 separate legal battles over the past 2 years. Perfect, Autumn mutters, a predatory smile curving her lips. Let's see what the golden boy has up his sleeve this time. Across town, in a converted warehouse in the Seaport District, Jackson Montgomery is in the middle of his own morning routine, a chaotic contrast to Autumn's methodical dawn. Marcus, have you seen the market analysis for the Roxbury project? Jackson calls across the open workspace, stepping over a prototype housing model that occupies the center of their office floor. Dad's people are pushing for answers on our timeline. Marcus Brantley looks up from his dual monitors, expression skeptical. You mean Warren Montgomery is actually asking about something other than profit margins? That's new. He says he has a personal interest in this one, Jackson replies, running a hand through his sandy hair. Which usually means he's found a new way to turn community development into another yacht. And you're still partnering with him because... Marcus raises an eyebrow, the gesture familiar after 15 years of friendship. Jackson sighs, dropping into the chair opposite Marcus's desk. Because he controls the land we need, and because I'm trying to prove that sustainable, equitable housing development is possible even within the hellscape that is modern capitalism. How noble, Marcus deadpans, sliding a folder across the desk. Here's the analysis. And fair warning, Reynolds Law is representing the community coalition. Your favorite shark is circling. Autumn Reynolds? Jackson groans. Again? That woman has made it her personal mission to block every project I touch. Maybe because you're working with your father, who has a 30-year history of exploiting exactly the communities you claim to want to help, Marcus points out, never one to sugarcoat the truth. Just saying, optics matter. The memory surfaces unbidden. Jackson at 12, overhearing his father on the phone, these people don't understand the value of their properties. That's why we get them so cheap. The shame that burned through him then still smolders now, driving his determination to be different, to rebuild the Montgomery name into something worth respecting. This project is different, Jackson insists. Equi-Homes technology could revolutionize affordable housing. The modular design adapts to family size, the materials are sustainable, and most importantly, current residents get first rights to the new units at controlled rates. All of which sounds wonderful on paper, Marcus agrees, but you're still walking into that meeting with your father's name and your father's company attached. To Reynolds, that makes you the enemy. Jackson's phone buzzes with a reminder about the afternoon meeting. Then I'll just have to change her mind. Vanessa Whitehill's voice echoes in Autumn's memory as she steps into the conference room that afternoon. Never show uncertainty. Never let them see you calculating. She extends her hand to Warren Montgomery, the picture of professional courtesy despite her loathing for what his company represents. Dr. Whitehill's daughter, Warren says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Your reputation precedes you. As does yours, Mr. Montgomery, Autumn replies coolly. Her gaze shifts to the younger man beside him. Jackson Montgomery in person is more imposing than his photos suggest. Tall and athletic, with an easy confidence that speaks of privilege and opportunity. His handshake is firm, his blue eyes direct in a way that momentarily throws her off balance. Ms. Reynolds, he says. I've admired your work on community preservation cases. I hope we can find common ground today. The unexpected compliment catches her off guard. She'd prepared for arrogance, for dismissal, not for recognition. Common ground requires common goals, Mr. Montgomery. I'm not convinced we share those. The meeting proceeds with technical discussions about zoning, community impact assessments, and architectural plans. Autumn watches Jackson carefully, noting the way he corrects his father's terminology when discussing the neighborhood, community, not target area, the genuine enthusiasm when he describes adaptive housing models. For his part, Jackson finds himself struggling to maintain his preconception of Autumn Reynolds as a corporate obstacle. Her questions are incisive but fair, focused less on legal technicalities and more on the human cost of development. When she challenges their relocation assistance program as inadequate for elderly residents, he finds himself agreeing with her critique. Perhaps Ms. Reynolds could review our community engagement proposal, Jackson suggests, ignoring his father's sharp glance. Her expertise would be valuable in identifying gaps in our approach. I thought we were negotiating, not collaborating, Warren says, his jovial tone barely masking his irritation. We're problem-solving, Jackson counters. Isn't that more productive than litigation? The tension in the room thickens. Autumn studies Jackson, trying to reconcile this thoughtful advocate with the corporate raider she'd expected. Is this genuine concern or sophisticated strategy? Her professional instincts warn against trust even as her analytical mind registers the sincerity in his arguments. I'll need to consult with my clients before agreeing to any collaborative role, she says finally. But I'm willing to review your proposal, with the understanding that my primary obligation remains to the community coalition. As the meeting concludes, Jackson catches up to Autumn in the hallway. You don't trust me, he says. Not a question but an observation. I don't trust what your name represents, she corrects him. Montgomery Enterprises has a long history in Boston. Not all of it flattering. I'm not my father, Jackson says quietly. Aren't you? Autumn challenges. You're working with him. benefiting from his connections, his capital, his influence. While trying to change how that influence is used, he counters. Sometimes you have to work within a broken system to fix it. And sometimes you have to tear it down and start over, she says. Their eyes lock, mutual assessment mingled with unexpected recognition. For a brief moment, something shifts in the air between them, a current of connection beneath their fundamental disagreement. Maybe we need both approaches, Jackson suggests. Autumn doesn't answer immediately. She's distracted by the sudden realization that Jackson Montgomery has his father's height and bearing but somehow reminds her of the father in her refrigerator photo, that same intensity of purpose behind his eyes. We'll see, she says finally, and walks away with the unsettling feeling that this case has just become far more complicated than she anticipated. Ever had that love-hate spark with someone who gets under your skin but somehow pulls you in? Yeah, if you've been there, or know someone who has, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, let me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, quick heads up. Autumn and Jackson are about to hit some unexpected twists. You might want to brace yourself, things are getting real. Hours later, as night falls over Boston, two people in different parts of the city find themselves thinking about an unexpected encounter, each dismissing their curiosity as professional interest, each unaware of the tangled history that binds them together, and neither prepared for how completely their carefully structured worlds are about to unravel. Chapter 2. 3 weeks after their initial meeting, Autumn finds herself in a situation she never anticipated, sitting across from Jackson Montgomery at a community center in Roxbury, listening to him explain adaptive housing design to a skeptical audience of neighborhood residents. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the meeting room, but they do nothing to dim the passion in his voice as he addresses an elderly woman's concerns. No, Mrs. Johnson, you wouldn't have to move during construction. That's the whole point of our phased approach, Jackson explains, crouching down to be at eye level with the woman in her wheelchair. We build the new units first, then help folks transition directly from old to new. No temporary relocations. And my garden? Mrs. Johnson presses, her lined face suspicious. I've tended those roses for 40 years, young man. We'll transplant them personally, Jackson promises. I'll help dig them up myself if that would make you feel better about it. Autumn watches this exchange with reluctant admiration. When the community coalition had demanded direct meetings with the developers, she'd expected corporate representatives delivering rehearsed talking points. Instead, Jackson has shown up 3 evenings in a row, without his father, without PR handlers, willing to face the community's anger and skepticism directly. He's good, whispers Zoe Patterson, sliding into the metal folding chair beside Autumn. Her oldest friend since their undergraduate days at Howard University, Zoe has become the coalition's marketing advisor, helping amplify their concerns about the development. Almost makes you forget he's a Montgomery. Almost, Autumn agrees, though something in her tone makes Zoe look at her more closely. Oh no, Zoe says, recognition dawning. You're impressed by him. I'm professionally acknowledging effective community engagement, Autumn corrects her. That's why you've been watching him like he's a critical witness on cross-examination for the past hour. Autumn tears her gaze away from Jackson, who is now kneeling on the floor with neighborhood children, showing them a 3D model of the proposed play areas. I'm monitoring his interactions to assess sincerity and identify potential legal vulnerabilities. Right. And I'm just here for the stale coffee and metal chairs. Zoe grins. It's okay to admit he's not the enemy you thought he was. Or that he looks good in those jeans. That is completely irrelevant to this case, Autumn says, fighting the heat rising to her cheeks. And we still don't know if this whole community-conscious developer act is genuine or just sophisticated PR. So find out, Zoe challenges. You're always telling me how good you are at getting to the truth. The meeting concludes with tentative progress. Not acceptance of the development plan, but willingness to continue the conversation. As people file out of the community center, Jackson approaches Autumn with an unexpected request. "I need your help," he says without preamble. "There's a critical design flaw in our community transition plan, and I think you're the only one who can help me fix it." Autumn raises an eyebrow. "Is this where I'm supposed to be flattered that the great Jackson Montgomery needs my assistance? This is where you decide if you care more about being right or about getting the best possible outcome for your clients," he counters, not rising to the bait. "I've got the technical specs for the project at the office. I could use a legal perspective on our resident protection clauses." "It's 9:30 at night," Autumn points out. Jackson shrugs. "I've got coffee and takeout menus. Unless you have another commitment?" The challenge is clear in his eyes, and something in Autumn. The same competitive drive that made her captain of the debate team and top of her law school class, refuses to back down. "Fine. 1 hour." 1 hour turns into 3 as they pore over architectural plans and legal documents in Equihome's conference room. The remains of Thai food containers litter the table between them, and Autumn has long since abandoned her suit jacket and heels. The surprising thing isn't how late it's gotten, it's how easily they've fallen into a rhythm of collaborative problem-solving. "If we adjust the phasing here," Jackson says, pointing to the site map, "we can preserve the community garden entirely. Mrs. Johnson keeps her roses, and we get better solar exposure for the rooftop panels." "But that delays completion of the affordable units," Autumn counters, shifting closer to see the details. "My clients need guarantees about timeline as much as location." "What if we," Jackson begins, then stops abruptly as he realizes how close they're standing. For a moment, neither moves. Autumn becomes acutely aware of his cologne, something subtle and woody, and the intensity in his eyes when he's focused on solving a problem. "What if we what?" she prompts, stepping back slightly, reclaiming professional distance. Jackson clears his throat. "What if we incorporate temporary upgrades to the existing structures during Phase 1? Quality of life improvements while they wait for the permanent units." "That could work," Autumn admits. "If you're serious about the budget for it." "I am." Jackson's voice is quiet but firm. "This isn't just about profit margins for me, Autumn. Whatever you might think. Then why work with your father at all?" The question emerges before she can stop it, the central contradiction she can't reconcile. His business model has always been about maximum profit through minimum investment in these neighborhoods. Jackson is silent for a long moment, staring out at the Boston skyline visible through the office windows. "My father built his empire during a different era," he says finally. "I'm not excusing his methods, but I am trying to evolve them. Change happens from within sometimes. And sometimes it takes external pressure," Autumn says. "Lawsuits. Protests. Public accountability. Like the pressure you're applying?" There's no resentment in his tone, only thoughtful consideration. "Exactly like that." He turns to face her fully. "Maybe we need both. Your pressure from the outside. My influence from the inside." The moment feels significant, a potential shift from adversaries to allies with a common goal, if different approaches. Autumn feels something loosen in her chest, a willingness to consider possibilities she'd previously dismissed. The spell breaks when Jackson's phone buzzes with a text. His expression darkens as he reads it. "My father," he explains. "He wants to know why I'm fraternizing with the opposition instead of neutralizing the legal threat." His words, not mine. "Charming," Autumn says dryly. "Does he know you're reconsidering the entire northern section of the development based on my suggestions?" "Not yet." Jackson's smile returns, conspiratorial now. "But he will when I present our revised plan." "Our plan?" Autumn challenges. "Would you prefer I take all the credit?" "I'd prefer you remember whose interests I'm representing," she says, but there's less edge to her words than there would have been 3 hours ago. As she gathers her things to leave, Jackson hesitates. We make a good team, you know. When we're not trying to destroy each other. Don't get ahead of yourself, Montgomery. I haven't decided not to destroy you yet. His laugh follows her to the elevator, unexpectedly warm and genuine. The next morning, Autumn arrives at her mother's Beacon Hill townhouse for their monthly breakfast. A tradition that began in law school when Autumn realized that scheduled appointments were the only reliable way to see her perpetually busy mother. You look tired, is Vanessa's greeting as she opens the door, ever the diagnostician. Late night with case files again? Good morning to you too, Mom, Autumn says, kissing her mother's cheek. And yes, working late on the Roxbury development case. They settle in the formal dining room where Vanessa has laid out her usual impressive spread, fresh fruit, protein-rich quiche, and the strong coffee they both depend on. Autumn waits until they're seated before mentioning, I've been working directly with Jackson Montgomery on revisions to their proposal. Vanessa's fork pauses halfway to her mouth. Montgomery? Warren Montgomery's son? Yes. He's heading up the technical side of the development. Autumn watches her mother carefully, noting the subtle tightening around her eyes. He seems genuinely committed to creating a sustainable, community-centered project. The Montgomerys are committed to one thing only, their own enrichment, Vanessa says, her voice suddenly cold. I'm surprised you'd let yourself be taken in by whatever act he's putting on. The vehemence of her mother's response is startling. I'm not taken in by anything, Mom. I'm doing my job, finding the best possible outcome for my clients. And that involves getting cozy with Warren Montgomery's son? Vanessa's precise surgeon's fingers tighten around her coffee cup. That family cannot be trusted, Autumn. Not by the community, and certainly not by you. Do you know them personally? Autumn asks, sensing depths beneath her mother's reaction. Vanessa sets down her cup with deliberate care. Boston is a small city in certain circles. I know Warren Montgomery's reputation. That's enough. Before Autumn can press further, Vanessa deftly changes the subject to an upcoming medical conference. The moment passes, but Autumn files away her mother's uncharacteristically emotional response for later examination. Across town, Jackson is having an equally tense conversation in his father's Back Bay office. You're letting that Reynolds woman lead you around by the nose, Warren says, leaning back in his leather chair, the morning light reflecting off the harbor behind him. She's using these community meetings to build a case against us, and you're helping her do it. She's representing legitimate concerns, Jackson counters. Concerns we should be addressing anyway if we want this project to succeed. Warren waves a dismissive hand. The project will succeed because we have the capital, the connections, and the right property portfolio. This hand-holding community outreach is a waste of resources. It's not hand-holding to actually listen to the people who will be affected by our development, Jackson says, feeling the familiar frustration rise. How many times have they had variations of this same argument? And Autumn Reynolds isn't just any attorney. She's brilliant, thorough, and genuinely cares about her clients. Something shifts in Warren's expression at the mention of Autumn's name, a flicker of, what? Discomfort? Recognition? It's gone before Jackson can identify it. Autumn, is it? First name basis already? Warren's tone turns knowing. Be careful, son. Mixing business with pleasure is rarely profitable. It's not like that, Jackson says automatically, though the denial feels hollow even to his own ears. There is something between him and Autumn, not romance, not yet, but a connection he can't quite define. A recognition of complementary strengths, of shared purpose beneath their different methods. Even worse, Warren says. Don't let admiration cloud your judgment. The Reynolds girl is not your friend. She's not your partner. She's an obstacle between us and the most significant development opportunity this company has had in a decade. Maybe she's forcing us to build a better project, Jackson suggests. One that actually serves the community instead of just extracting value from it. Warren's laugh is cold. You still think like an idealist despite everything I've taught you. This is business, Jackson. The community benefits when we succeed: jobs, tax revenue, improved infrastructure. Everything else is sentimentality. Tell that to Mrs. Johnson and her 40-year-old rose garden, Jackson mutters. What? Nothing. Jackson stands, done with the conversation. I've got to get to the community center. We have another meeting this afternoon. As he reaches the door, Warren calls after him, Marcus called me about your revised proposal. Don't make any commitments to these people without running it by legal first. That's an order, not a suggestion. Jackson doesn't reply, letting the heavy door close behind him with a satisfying thud. The next week brings an unexpected complication. As Autumn arrives at the community center for their fourth joint meeting, she finds Marcus Brantley waiting outside instead of Jackson. He's been called away on urgent family business, Marcus explains, his expression carefully neutral. Mr. Montgomery Sr. had some kind of health episode this morning. Nothing serious, apparently, but Jackson wanted to be there. Of course, Autumn says, ignoring the small twinge of disappointment. Family comes first. Marcus studies her with thoughtful eyes. You're not what I expected, you know. Meaning? Jackson described you as brilliantly adversarial. I expected someone more. More what? Autumn challenges, arching an eyebrow. Less willing to find middle ground, Marcus finishes diplomatically. It's a good surprise. Jackson needs allies who understand both worlds. Corporate development and community advocacy. I'm not his ally, Autumn corrects. I'm an attorney representing community interests that happen to occasionally align with his revised vision for this project. Marcus's smile suggests he doesn't entirely believe her. Of course. My mistake. The meeting proceeds efficiently, but Autumn finds herself missing Jackson's presence, his energy, his willingness to engage directly with community members rather than talking at them. Marcus is competent and respectful, but lacks Jackson's genuine passion for the project's human impact. Everything okay? Zoe asks during a break, handing Autumn a cup of mediocre coffee. You seem distracted. Just wondering how serious Warren Montgomery's health episode really is, Autumn admits. And whether it'll affect our timeline. And it has nothing to do with the fact that your favorite sparring partner isn't here? Jackson is not Autumn begins, then stops at Zoe's knowing look. Fine. The meetings are more productive when he's here. He actually listens instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. Unlike most men we know, Zoe agrees. Speaking of which, your mother called me. She's worried about how much time you're spending on this case. Autumn frowns. She called you instead of me? That's new. Not so new. She's always called me when she's worried about you but doesn't want to fight directly. Remember law school? When she thought I was working too hard and not dating enough? Autumn recalls with a sigh. As if she's one to talk about work-life balance. I think it's more than that this time, Zoe says, lowering her voice. She specifically asked if you were getting too close to the Montgomery situation. Her words, not mine. The Montgomery situation? What does that even mean? I don't know, but she sounded genuinely concerned, Autumn. Not just her usual controlling self. Maybe you should ask her about it. Before Autumn can respond, her phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number, Warren stable but asking questions about the project. Can we talk? Jackson. She hesitates, thumb hovering over the screen. Professional boundaries would suggest routing communication through official channels. But something about the direct outreach, the implied trust in that simple message, makes her respond, Cafe on Arlington, 7 p.m.? His reply comes immediately, see you then. Interesting development? Zoe asks, noticing Autumn's expression change. Just case-related, Autumn deflects. Let's get back to the meeting. Later that evening, in the quiet corner of a cafe far enough from both their offices to minimize the chance of being seen together, Autumn listens as Jackson describes his father's collapse. The doctors say it was just exhaustion and dehydration, but it scared him. Scared me too, honestly, Jackson admits, cradling his coffee between his palms. The evening light softens his features, revealing vulnerability beneath his usual confidence. He's been pushing himself too hard on this project. Acting like it's personally important to him in a way I've never seen before. The Roxbury development specifically? Autumn asks, curiosity piqued. Why that one? I don't know. When I asked, he changed the subject. Jackson's brow furrows. But while I was helping him get settled at home, he said something strange. He asked if I'd been spending time with Vanessa's daughter. Not you specifically, Vanessa's daughter. Autumn feels a chill despite the cafe's warmth. My mother's name is Vanessa. I know, Jackson says quietly. I looked it up after he said it. Dr. Vanessa Whitehill Reynolds, cardiothoracic surgeon at Mass General. They know each other. It's not a question but a realization crystallizing between them. Apparently, Jackson agrees. And when I tried to ask about it, he shut down completely. Said I should focus on the project, not office gossip. Autumn thinks back to her mother's visceral reaction to the Montgomery name, the way she dismissed them without specific explanation. My mother had a similar response when I mentioned working with you. She said your family couldn't be trusted, but wouldn't elaborate. They sit in contemplative silence, each turning over this new puzzle piece that somehow connects their families beyond current professional interests. It could be just old professional rivalries, Jackson suggests, though his tone suggests he doesn't believe it. Boston's upper circles are small. Maybe, Autumn says. But my mother doesn't get emotional about business competitors. Whatever this is, it feels personal. Jackson hesitates, then reaches across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. Do we need to know? For the project, I mean. Does their history, whatever it is, have to affect what we're trying to build? The question hangs between them, layered with meaning beyond the development project. Are they doomed to inherit their parents' conflicts? Can they build something new on potentially fractured foundations? I don't know, Autumn answers honestly. But I do know that secrets have a way of surfacing at the worst possible moments. If there's something that could impact this project, or the people counting on us to get it right, we should try to uncover it before it blindsides us. Jackson nods slowly. Agreed. But how? Neither of our parents seems willing to talk about it. Autumn thinks of the photograph she glimpsed in Warren's wallet, her father's smile frozen in time beside a younger Warren Montgomery. We could start with public records. Business partnerships, property transactions from when our parents were younger. I have access to the Montgomery Enterprises archives, Jackson offers. And there's the lake house in the Berkshires, my grandfather's old place. Dad keeps boxes of old files there. We could take a drive up, see what we find. The suggestion, a day away together, investigating their shared past, should feel inappropriate given their professional relationship. Instead, it feels necessary, a path they need to walk together regardless of where it leads. This weekend? Autumn suggests, surprising herself with her eagerness. Saturday, Jackson confirms, a smile warming his eyes. I'll drive. As they part ways outside the cafe, the evening air cool against their skin, neither acknowledges the subtle shift in their relationship, no longer strictly adversaries, not quite friends, but something new taking shape between them, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Ever caught feelings for someone who totally goes against your type, or everything you thought you stood for? Drop a comment and share your story, I'd love to hear about those unexpected connections. If you're hooked on this journey so far, don't forget to tap that like button. It's wild how often our assumptions fade once we really see someone for who they are, isn't it? 3 days later, as autumn sunlight dapples the winding road to the Berkshires, Autumn finds herself studying Jackson's profile as he drives. The concentration in his eyes as he navigates mountain curves, the way one corner of his mouth lifts slightly when he's thinking, details she's become attuned to without realizing it. "You're staring," he notes without looking away from the road. "Professional observation," she counters smoothly. "You can learn a lot about opposing counsel by watching them when they think you're not." "And what have you learned?" There's amusement in his voice, but curiosity too. Autumn considers deflecting with a joke, then decides on honesty instead. "That you're not who I thought you were when we first met. You're more complicated." "Complicated good or complicated bad?" "Just complicated," she says. Still figuring out the rest. His smile suggests he understands exactly what she means. Chapter 3. The Montgomery Lake house emerges from towering pines like a memory made solid, weathered cedar siding, wide windows reflecting the afternoon light, a broad deck extending toward the water. It's smaller than Autumn expected, more rustic cabin than statement of wealth. As Jackson cuts the engine, the silence of the Berkshires settles around them, broken only by birdsong and the gentle lap of water against the shore. "My grandfather built it himself in the 60s, Jackson explains as he unlocks the front door. "Before the Montgomery name meant anything in Boston real estate. Dad always threatened to tear it down and build something worthy of the family, but never got around to it." Inside, the space is a time capsule, knotty pine walls, vintage furniture, framed family photos spanning decades. Autumn moves to these immediately, studying the faces of Montgomerys through the years. She stops at one showing a teenage Warren with his arm around another young man, both in swimming trunks by this very lake. "Is that," she begins. "Your father?" Jackson finishes, stepping beside her. "I think it might be." The timeframe fits. The revelation settles between them, concrete evidence that their families were once connected, not just professionally but personally. Friends who spent summers together at this lake before something drove them irrevocably apart. They were friends, Autumn says softly, the concept difficult to reconcile with her mother's obvious distaste for Warren Montgomery and everything he represents. "More than that, maybe," Jackson muses, pointing to another photo, their fathers in graduation caps and gowns, Warren's arms slung around James Reynolds' shoulders. "They went to MIT together. Engineering program. My father was an architect," Autumn says. "He taught at MIT before he died. Dad never finished his engineering degree," Jackson adds. "Dropped out to start Montgomery Enterprises. He always said he didn't need a degree to understand property values." They move through the house methodically, searching closets and storage spaces until they find what they're looking for, boxes labeled MIT and early projects stacked in the back of a bedroom closet. Jackson pulls them out, sneezing at the dust that rises as they settle on the cabin floor. "How organized is your father?" Autumn asks, eyeing the haphazard labels. "About what you'd expect from someone who has people to organize things for him," Jackson replies wryly. "We might be here a while." Hours pass as they sift through old papers, creating separate piles for relevant documents and unrelated family memorabilia. Outside, the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows through the windows as day transitions toward evening. Neither suggests stopping, both driven by the mystery unfolding through faded photos and yellowed papers. "Look at this," Jackson says eventually, holding up an old blueprint carefully unfolded on the coffee table. "Adaptive Residential Communities, a New Approach to Urban Housing. Joint project by James Reynolds and Warren Montgomery, 1987. Autumn moves closer, their shoulders touching as they examine the detailed plans together. The design is revolutionary even by modern standards, modular units that could expand or contract based on family needs, community spaces integrated throughout, sustainable energy concepts decades ahead of their time. This looks like. Autumn trails off, the connection forming in her mind. Like Equihome's current designs, Jackson finishes, his voice tight with emotion. The same core concepts I've been developing for years. Dad always said my ideas were impractical, utopian, but he knew they could work. He'd seen them before. They were developing this together, Autumn says, gathering more papers. Financial projections, grant applications, correspondence with city officials. It was going to be their first major project after graduate school. So what happened? Jackson wonders aloud. Why didn't they build it? The answer comes in a folder labeled simply Roxbury, containing newspaper clippings and legal documents. As they read through them, the story emerges piece by piece, a tragic, familiar tale of ambition, betrayal, and racial politics in 1980s Boston. Montgomery Enterprises files solo patent on adaptive housing design, one headline reads. Another follows, Black architect claims theft of intellectual property by former partner. Autumn's hands tremble slightly as she reads her father's quoted words, Warren Montgomery and I developed this concept together over 3 years. For him to claim sole ownership is not just a betrayal of our friendship but an erasure of my contribution to what could transform urban housing. Jackson's face has gone pale, his jaw tight as he reads document after document detailing his father's systematic appropriation of James Reynolds' work, altered drawings with James' name removed, patent applications filed while James was visiting family in Atlanta, meetings with investors where Warren presented the work as his sole creation. He stole your father's designs, Jackson says, voice hollow with shock and shame. Not just borrowed or adapted, flat out stole them and cut him out completely. And when my father threatened legal action. Autumn continues, finding the final pieces of the puzzle in a series of increasingly hostile legal letters. My father used his connections to make sure no firm in Boston would represent him, Jackson concludes, reading from the correspondence between attorneys. Said he'd blacklist anyone who took the case. The weight of this revelation presses down on them both. The ugly truth of privilege and power wielded as a weapon, of opportunity stolen along racial lines, of a friendship destroyed by one man's ambition and entitlement. This is why my mother hates the Montgomery name, Autumn says quietly. This is why she was so concerned about me working with you. I knew my father could be ruthless in business, but this. Jackson shakes his head, genuine anguish in his eyes. To do this to his best friend. A terrible thought occurs to Autumn. My father died less than a year after this. Mom always said it was a heart condition, but he was only 36. The stress of fighting this battle, losing everything he'd worked for. She doesn't finish the thought. Doesn't need to. The implication hangs in the air between them, that Warren Montgomery's actions might have contributed to James Reynolds' premature death, might have robbed a young Autumn of her father's presence. Jackson reaches for her hand, an unconscious gesture of comfort that neither acknowledges but neither pulls away from. I'm so sorry, Autumn. I had no idea. How could you, she responds, no accusation in her tone. We've both been kept in the dark about this history. Outside, storm clouds gather over the lake, the first distant rumble of thunder echoing the turbulence of their discoveries. Rain begins to patter against the windows, light at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself is responding to the uncovered pain. We should head back, Autumn says, though the thought of the long, dark drive through mountain roads in this weather holds little appeal. Jackson glances out at the increasingly violent storm. It's not safe to drive these roads in this weather. We should wait it out. He hesitates, then adds, there's food in the freezer, and plenty of room. We can head back first thing in the morning. The practical suggestion makes sense, but both are aware of the boundary they're crossing, the professional distance eroding with each revelation, each shared moment of discovery. Autumn should insist on leaving, on maintaining the clear lines between them. Instead, she finds herself nodding. I'll check the circuit breakers, Jackson says as the lights flicker ominously. Mountain storms can get intense. Left alone with the scattered evidence of their family's broken friendship, Autumn finds herself drawn to a particular photo, their fathers standing proudly before a construction site, arms around each other's shoulders, genuine joy radiating from both faces. She picks it up, studies her father's familiar features, trying to reconcile the happy man in this image with the profound injustice he suffered. When Jackson returns with armfuls of firewood, she's still holding the photograph. "I found this in my father's wallet," she says without preamble. The day of his collapse at the gala. He's carried it all these years. Jackson sets down the wood beside the stone fireplace. Guilt, maybe? Or regret, Autumn suggests. Maybe both. As Jackson builds a fire to ward off the growing chill, Autumn moves to the kitchen, finding pasta and sauce in the well-stocked cabinets. They work in parallel, establishing a domestic rhythm that feels strangely natural despite the circumstances. By the time the storm knocks out the power entirely, they've created a small bubble of warmth and light in the main room, fire crackling, candles glowing, simple meals shared across the coffee table amid their research. "Your mother never remarried?" Jackson asks as they finish eating, the conversation having drifted to their childhoods. Autumn shakes her head. Threw herself into her surgical practice instead. Saved countless hearts while keeping careful guard over her own. She takes a sip of the red wine Jackson found in a cabinet. "What about your mom?" "Left when I was 12, he says with practiced neutrality that doesn't quite mask the old hurt. Decided life as Warren Montgomery's wife wasn't worth the compromises required. She lives in Paris now with husband number 3. "I'm sorry," Autumn says simply. Jackson shrugs. "Made me determined to build different kinds of relationships than my parents had. More honest ones." His eyes meet hers across the flickering firelight. "Harder than it sounds, sometimes. Honesty requires vulnerability," Autumn observes. "Not exactly encouraged in our professional worlds." "No," he agrees. "Much safer to remain opponents. Clear boundaries. Clear expectations." "Much safer," she echoes, though the word "safe" feels increasingly irrelevant to whatever is developing between them, this connection forged through shared discovery, shared pain, shared purpose. Thunder crashes directly overhead, making them both jump, then laugh at their synchronized response. The moment breaks the growing tension, allowing Autumn to voice the question that's been building since their discoveries began. "What do we do with all this, Jackson? These aren't just old papers, they're evidence of intellectual theft that directly relates to our current project. The designs you're using now, they originated with my father." Jackson's expression grows serious. "I know. And I'm not my father, Autumn. I won't perpetuate his theft." He runs a hand through his hair, thinking. "The original Roxbury plans, they were meant to be transformative, community-centered development. Exactly what we're trying to do now, but with even deeper connections to the neighborhood. My father's vision," Autumn says softly. "A vision that deserves to be realized," Jackson agrees. "With proper credit, proper acknowledgement." "And your father? He still controls Montgomery Enterprises. Do you think he'll simply admit to stealing my father's work after hiding it for decades?" The question hangs between them, the central obstacle to any resolution. Warren Montgomery has spent a lifetime building his reputation, his empire, on a foundation that includes this profound betrayal. Would he willingly expose that now? "I don't know," Jackson admits. "But I do know I can't move forward with this project, with any project, without addressing this. However difficult the conversation may be." The honesty in his voice, the integrity in his stance despite what it might cost him personally, touches something in Autumn, the final wall of her resistance crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence that Jackson Montgomery is, indeed, not his father. "We should confront them together," she suggests. "My mother and your father. All the cards on the table, after all these years. That won't be an easy conversation, Jackson warns. No, Autumn agrees. But necessary ones rarely are. Outside, the storm begins to abate, the thunder moving off into the distance. Inside, in the warm circle of firelight, two people from families divided by betrayal find themselves drawn inexorably closer, physically, emotionally, the space between them charged with recognition and possibility. Autumn, Jackson says softly, her name both a question and an acknowledgement. She meets his gaze without pretense or professional armor, allowing herself to be seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time since this case began. I know, she replies, understanding passing between them without need for further words. When he leans forward, she meets him halfway, their first kiss a gentle exploration that quickly deepens into something more urgent, years of maintained distance and denied attraction collapsing in the wake of shared truth. Funny how family secrets tend to show up when you least expect them, right? Have you ever uncovered something about your family's past that completely shifted how you saw things? Share your story in the comments. I'm always amazed by what comes to light. If you're hooked and need to know what's really going on between Autumn and Jackson's families, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. The truth is coming, and it's going to change everything. Chapter 4. Dawn arrives with gentle persistence, sunlight filtering through pine trees to dapple the cabin floor where scattered documents still lay in organized chaos. Autumn wakes slowly, momentarily disoriented before remembering where she is, curled on the sofa beneath a knitted throw, the embers of last night's fire still glowing faintly in the hearth. The scent of coffee draws her fully into consciousness. Jackson stands at the kitchen counter, his back to her, morning light highlighting the strong lines of his shoulders beneath a soft Henley. Two mugs wait on the counter beside him, steam rising in delicate spirals. Such a simple, domestic scene, yet the intimacy of it causes Autumn's chest to tighten with conflicting emotions. You're up, he says, turning with a smile that shows no regret for last night's kiss, only a quiet contentment that both soothes and unsettles her. Sleep okay? Better than I expected, she admits, accepting the coffee he offers. Prepared exactly as she likes it, though she doesn't remember telling him her preference. He must have been paying attention during their late-night work sessions. The thought warms her more than the mug in her hands. They move to the deck overlooking the lake, the morning air crisp with early autumn chill but promising warmth as the sun climbs higher. Below them, the water's surface mirrors the perfect blue sky, last night's storm leaving no trace except heightened colors and clarity. About last night, Jackson begins, breaking their companionable silence. Which part? Autumn asks. The discovery that your father stole my father's life's work, or what happened after? The bluntness of her question surprises a laugh from Jackson, a genuine sound that crinkles the corners of his eyes. Both, I suppose. Though I was specifically referring to the latter. Autumn takes a deliberate sip of coffee, gathering her thoughts. Professional training urges caution, distance, a careful retreat from emotional vulnerability. But something stronger, something that feels like her father's influence, pushes her toward honesty instead. I don't regret it, she says simply. But it complicates things that were already complicated. It does, Jackson agrees. Though I'm beginning to think some complications might be worth navigating. His eyes hold hers, unflinching and hopeful, offering a possibility that extends beyond this moment, beyond this case. The temptation to lean into that possibility is strong, stronger than Autumn expected. But the papers scattered inside, the evidence of betrayal that links their families in ways neither fully understands yet, demands resolution first. We need to talk to them, she says. Both of them. Together. Jackson nods, accepting her implicit redirection. My father is hosting a charity event at the Martha's Vineyard estate next weekend. High-profile donors, corporate sponsors. The kind of gathering where appearances matter too much for him to make a scene. You think that will restrain him when confronted with decades-old secrets coming to light? I think it gives us leverage, Jackson says. He won't want to risk his carefully cultivated image, especially not in front of the Boston elite he spent his life impressing. And my mother? Invite her. Officially, as a respected surgeon whose philanthropic interests align with the event's mission. She won't suspect anything until we've already gathered the key players. The plan takes shape between them, strategic, methodical, worthy of the lawyers and business strategists they are. By the time they begin the drive back to Boston, they have agreed on timing, approach, and contingencies. What neither discusses is the subtle shift in their relationship. The casual touches that occur as they move around each other, the quiet understanding that passes between them without words, the way Jackson's hand finds hers during a particularly winding stretch of mountain road, supposedly for comfort but lingering long after the curves straighten. They are caught in the fragile space between what they've been to each other and what they might become, no longer adversaries but not yet fully allies, their professional identities both barrier and bridge to deeper connection. Back in Boston, they part with the promise to continue their research separately, Jackson diving into Montgomery Enterprises' historical records while Autumn approaches her mother with carefully calibrated questions designed to uncover pieces of the past without revealing their full discoveries. 3 days later, they meet again at a small cafe in Cambridge, far from their usual professional territories. The table between them is covered with notes, photocopies, and timeline drafts as they piece together the full story of the partnership between their fathers. I found the original patent filing, Jackson says, sliding a document across to Autumn. Look at the date, 3 days after your father left for a conference in Atlanta. Dad must have been planning it for weeks, waiting for the opportunity. Autumn studies the document, a familiar ache blooming in her chest at the sight of technical drawings she recognizes as her father's distinctive style, submitted under Warren Montgomery's name alone. The betrayal was so methodical. So calculating. There's more, Jackson says, his expression troubled. I found financial records showing payments to your father's estate after his death. Regular deposits for nearly 20 years. What? Autumn's head snaps up, confusion clouding her features. That's impossible. My mother never mentioned any payments from Montgomery Enterprises. Not from the company, Jackson clarifies. From my father personally. Labeled as Educational Trust Fund. The implication lands like a physical blow. My education, Autumn whispers. Harvard undergrad, Yale Law, my mother always said it was covered by my father's life insurance and her surgeon's salary. But if Warren Montgomery was secretly funding it, it suggests guilt, Jackson finishes. Or at least some twisted attempt at atonement. Without accountability, Autumn adds bitterly. Without acknowledgement or apology. Classic dad, Jackson says, his voice tight. Trying to buy his way out of moral responsibility without ever admitting wrongdoing. The discovery adds yet another layer of complexity to their shared history, not just professional rivalry and stolen ideas, but financial entanglement spanning decades. Warren Montgomery has been a shadow presence in Autumn's life far longer than she realized, his money funding the very education that positioned her to challenge his company's practices. Does your mother know? Jackson asks. About the payments? She must, Autumn reasons. She would have had to accept them, manage the trust fund. Her brow furrows as she reconsiders years of her mother's cryptic comments about obligations and compromises. This explains so much about her, her bitterness, her insistence that I never trust anyone with my future, her reaction when I mentioned working with you. She thought history was repeating itself, Jackson suggests. Another Montgomery taking advantage of another Reynolds. But she knew better than anyone that I was actually fighting against Montgomery Enterprises projects, Autumn counters. So why not tell me the truth? Why keep accepting his money while raising me to oppose everything he stands for? Maybe that was the point, Jackson suggests thoughtfully. Using his own money to train you to dismantle his legacy. The idea is so perfectly aligned with her mother's strategic thinking that Autumn can't help but laugh, a shocked, somewhat pained sound. The ultimate long game. Raise me on his blood money to become his worst nightmare. And then I came along and complicated everything by not being the villain she expected, Jackson adds with a wry smile. You're still a Montgomery, Autumn points out, though the words hold none of their former accusation. And you're still a Reynolds, he counters. Maybe that's enough reason for us to finish what our father started, the right way this time. The suggestion hangs between them, laden with possibility. Before Autumn can respond, her phone buzzes with a message from her mother. Why am I receiving an invitation to Warren Montgomery's charity gala? Did you have something to do with this? It's starting, she tells Jackson, showing him the message. She's suspicious already. Good, he says with surprising firmness. Maybe it's time for suspicion after decades of carefully maintained secrets. Autumn studies him, this man who has transformed in her mind from entitled heir to principled ally in the span of weeks. You're really prepared to confront your father publicly? To risk your position at Montgomery Enterprises? Your inheritance? Some legacies aren't worth preserving, Jackson says simply. I'd rather build something new, something honest, than continue profiting from theft and deception. The conviction in his voice stirs something in Autumn, admiration, respect, and something deeper that she's not yet ready to name. It also brings a painful realization: her own mother has been complicit in maintaining this deception, accepting Warren Montgomery's money while nurturing Autumn's hatred of all he represents. I need to talk to her before the gala, Autumn decides. Not to expose everything, but to give her a chance to tell me the truth herself. Do you think she will? I don't know, Autumn admits. But I have to give her the opportunity. The next evening finds Autumn in her mother's elegant kitchen, helping prepare the dinner that has been their Sunday tradition for years. The familiar ritual, chopping vegetables, searing protein, simmering sauces, provides a comforting backdrop for the uncomfortable conversation she needs to initiate. I received an invitation to the Montgomery Foundation Gala, Vanessa says casually, though Autumn doesn't miss the careful assessment in her mother's eyes. As did you, apparently. Jackson Montgomery invited us both, Autumn confirms, keeping her tone neutral. The foundation is supporting several medical research initiatives that align with your work. And why would Jackson Montgomery care about my attendance at his father's event? Vanessa's knife moves with surgical precision, dicing an onion into perfectly uniform pieces. Perhaps because I mentioned your research during one of our project meetings, Autumn suggests. He was impressed. Vanessa's hands pause briefly before resuming their work. You've been spending considerable time with Warren Montgomery's son. The Roxbury project is complex. It requires collaboration. Collaboration, Vanessa repeats, the word laden with unspoken meaning. I hope you remember what I told you about the Montgomery family. That they can't be trusted, Autumn recites. That they care only about their own enrichment. She takes a deliberate breath, then adds, what you didn't tell me is how you know that so personally. The knife stills. Vanessa's posture stiffens almost imperceptibly. What are you asking, Autumn? I found a photograph of Dad with Warren Montgomery. They were friends, weren't they? Before Dad died? Vanessa's expression reveals nothing, her surgeon's composure impenetrable. They knew each other. Boston's professional circles were small. More than knew each other, Autumn presses gently. They were at MIT together. They had plans to revolutionize urban housing. Partners. Ancient history, Vanessa dismisses, though her knuckles whiten around the knife handle. It has no bearing on your current case. It has every bearing, Autumn counters. Jackson and I are essentially working on the same concept they developed together: affordable, adaptable community housing. How can that be coincidence? Vanessa sets down the knife with deliberate care, finally meeting Autumn's gaze directly. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Mom. I'm asking directly, what happened between Dad and Warren Montgomery? And why have you kept it secret all these years? Something flickers in Vanessa's eyes, pain, perhaps, or fear. But her voice remains steady when she responds. Some doors are better left closed, Autumn. Especially when opening them can't change the past. But it could affect the future, Autumn insists. My future. This project. The legacy Dad left behind. Your father's legacy is you, Vanessa says with unexpected emotion. Everything else was taken from him. The admission, though vague, confirms Autumn's suspicions. Warren Montgomery stole Dad's work, didn't he? The designs, the patents, he claimed them as his own. Vanessa doesn't answer directly, but her silence is confirmation enough. What good does dredging this up now do? Warren won. He always wins. That's the lesson you should take from this, not some naive notion of justice decades too late. And the money? Autumn asks quietly. The educational trust fund that paid for Harvard and Yale? At this, genuine shock flashes across Vanessa's features, the first time Autumn can remember seeing her mother truly caught off guard. How did you find out that Warren Montgomery has been funding my education since Dad died? Jackson found the financial records. Autumn's voice remains calm despite the storm of emotions beneath. Were you ever going to tell me? Vanessa braces herself against the counter, suddenly looking her full age, the weight of decades of secrets visible in her posture. It was complicated, Autumn. Then uncomplicate it for me, Autumn urges. Help me understand why you would accept money from the man who betrayed Dad while raising me to fight against everything he stands for. Because that was the bargain, Vanessa says finally, her voice barely above a whisper. After your father died, after Warren's betrayal contributed to the stress that caused his heart attack, Warren came to me. No apology, no real acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just an offer, financial support for your education in exchange for my silence. Silence about the theft. About all of it, Vanessa confirms. The stolen designs, the blocked legal action, the threats against anyone who tried to help your father fight back. Warren was building his empire on your father's vision, and he couldn't risk the truth coming out. And you agreed? Autumn can't keep the shock from her voice. You let him buy your silence? I made a strategic choice, Vanessa corrects, steel returning to her spine. I was a widow with a young daughter and a demanding career. The money meant you would have every advantage, every opportunity to become someone powerful enough to challenge men like Warren Montgomery on their own turf. Using his own money against him, Autumn realizes. You were playing the long game. I was ensuring your father's true legacy, you, would have the resources to succeed in a world determined to keep people like us in our place. Vanessa's eyes shine with unshed tears. Was it a compromise? Yes. Would your father have approved? Probably not. But I did what I thought was best for you, Autumn. Always. The kitchen falls silent as Autumn absorbs this revelation, the years of calculated deception, the burden her mother carried alone, the complex web connecting her to the Montgomery family even before she met Jackson. The gala, Autumn says finally. Warren invited you specifically, knowing I'd be there with Jackson. He must suspect we're uncovering the truth. Vanessa's expression hardens. Warren Montgomery has always been 10 steps ahead of everyone else. If he's bringing us together now, after all these years, he has a reason. Or maybe Jackson is forcing his hand, Autumn suggests. He's not his father, Mom. He wants to make this right. Men like Warren don't raise sons who defy them, Vanessa says dismissively. Whatever Jackson Montgomery is offering you, partnership, validation, romance, remember that he was raised to protect family interests above all else. The warning stings, particularly because it targets Autumn's growing feelings for Jackson. You don't know him. I knew his father at your age, Vanessa counters. Brilliant, charming, seemingly principled, until principle conflicted with profit. Jackson walked away from his father's company to build something different, Autumn argues. He's risking his inheritance by confronting this history. So he claims, Vanessa says skeptically. Just be careful, Autumn. The Montgomery men have a way of making you believe in them right until the moment they betray you. Autumn wants to argue further, to defend Jackson with the conviction growing in her heart. But doubt creeps in, unwelcome yet persistent. What if her mother is right? What if her judgment is clouded by attraction and the intoxicating intimacy of shared purpose? I need to go, she says instead, gathering her purse. I'll see you at the gala. Autumn, Vanessa calls as she reaches the door. Whatever happens with the Montgomerys, whatever truth comes out, know that everything I did to protect you and your future. Autumn pauses, torn between understanding and disappointment. I know, Mom. But sometimes protection becomes its own kind of cage. The drive back to her apartment gives Autumn time to process her mother's revelations, to reconcile the strategic, calculating woman who made deals with Warren Montgomery with the fiercely protective mother who raised her to be independent and principled. The contradiction troubles her, blurring moral lines she once thought clear. Her phone rings as she parks, Jackson's name lighting up the screen. For a moment, her mother's warning echoes in her mind, urging caution. But the memory of their shared vulnerability at the lake house, the genuine remorse in Jackson's eyes when confronting his father's betrayal, strengthens her resolve. Hey, she answers, her voice steadier than she feels. How did it go with your mother? Jackson asks without preamble. She confirmed everything, Autumn says. The theft, the payments, the silence. She justified it as strategic, using Warren's money to position me for success while planning for me to eventually challenge his empire. That's impressively vindictive long-term planning, Jackson says, a note of reluctant admiration in his voice. She also warned me not to trust you, Autumn adds. Said Montgomery men are charming until the moment they betray you. Jackson's sharp intake of breath is audible across the line. And do you? Trust me? The question hangs between them, weighted with implications that extend far beyond their professional collaboration. Autumn closes her eyes, searching her heart for honest answer. I want to, she says finally. Despite everything, or maybe because of how you've handled everything, I find myself trusting you more than I probably should. For what it's worth, Jackson says softly, I've never been more invested in proving someone's mother wrong. The comment startles a laugh from Autumn, releasing some of the tension that has built throughout the day. We'll see at the gala, I suppose. Our parents, the truth, all those carefully maintained secrets exposed. Are you ready for that? Jackson asks. Once we do this, there's no going back for any of us. I've lived with half-truths my entire life, Autumn says with newfound conviction. I'm ready for the whole truth, whatever it costs. Then I'll see you Saturday, Jackson promises. We'll face them together. The word settles something in Autumn's chest, a certainty that regardless of their complicated history or uncertain future, in this moment, she and Jackson stand on the same side. Saturday arrives with picture-perfect weather, the kind wealthy donors pay premium prices to secure for their outdoor charity events. The Montgomery estate on Martha's Vineyard gleams in the late afternoon sunlight, manicured grounds extending to dramatic ocean views that have graced the pages of architectural magazines. Autumn arrives with her mother, both women dressed impeccably, Vanessa in surgical precision of tailored navy silk, Autumn in a deep emerald gown that complements her warm brown skin and makes her feel armored for battle. The tension between them remains unresolved, a current of unspoken fears and justifications that neither has attempted to bridge since their kitchen confrontation. Remember why we're here, Autumn murmurs as they hand their invitations to the attendant at the entrance. This is about truth, not revenge. Those lines blur when you've waited decades for justice, Vanessa replies, her posture perfect as they enter the grand hall where Boston's elite mingle over champagne and carefully curated hors d'oeuvres. Jackson finds them almost immediately, navigating the crowd with practiced ease that speaks to a lifetime of such events. In his tailored suit, with his confident stride, he is every inch Warren Montgomery's son, yet the warmth in his eyes when he spots Autumn holds nothing of his father's calculated charm. "Dr. Reynolds," he greets Vanessa with respectful deference. "Thank you for coming. Several of the research directors have been hoping to discuss your groundbreaking work in pediatric cardiac surgery." "I'm sure they have," Vanessa responds coolly. "Though I suspect my invitation had little to do with professional admiration." Jackson accepts the barb with grace. "Perhaps not initially," he admits. "But your presence here matters regardless of the complicated history between our families." Before Vanessa can respond, Warren Montgomery appears at his son's shoulder, his imposing presence commanding attention despite his recent health scare. "Vanessa," he says, his voice carrying the weight of decades of history. "It's been far too long." "Not nearly long enough, Warren," she replies with the same clinical detachment she would use with a difficult patient. Warren's attention shifts to Autumn, his assessment so similar to Jackson's usual expressions that she momentarily feels disoriented by the resemblance. "Ms. Reynolds. Your reputation precedes you. I understand you've been making quite an impression on my son." "We've found unexpected common ground," Autumn replies diplomatically, acutely aware of the watching crowd, the strategic nature of this public confrontation. "Indeed," Warren says, a knowing glint in his eye that suggests he understands exactly what has been happening between the younger generation. "Perhaps we should continue this reunion somewhere more private. The library has excellent views of the sunset." The invitation, more command than suggestion, sets their plan in motion. As they follow Warren through the crowd, Jackson catches Autumn's eye, a silent confirmation passing between them. Whatever happens next will change everything, for better or worse. The Montgomery Library is exactly as Autumn imagined, leather-bound volumes lining mahogany shelves, priceless art strategically placed, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the dramatic coastal landscape beyond. It is a room designed to impress, to remind visitors of the family's wealth, taste, and permanence in the social order. Warren gestures for them to sit but remains standing himself, power dynamics clear in his positioning. "I assume this meeting is not coincidental," he says without preamble. "Your sudden interest in philanthropy, Jackson. Your invitation to the Reynolds women. The research into old patents and business registrations." Jackson stiffens beside Autumn. "You've been monitoring my activities?" "I monitor all potential threats to Montgomery Enterprises," Warren replies smoothly. "Even those from my own son." "We know what you did to my father," Autumn interjects, unwilling to let Warren control the narrative. "We found the original designs, the patent applications, the timeline of theft." Warren's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes, not guilt, exactly, but perhaps a hint of fatigue. Business is rarely as black and white as young idealists imagine. "Stealing your best friend's life's work isn't business," Jackson counters, righteous anger seeping through his usual composure. "It's betrayal, plain and simple." "Is that what Vanessa has told you?" Warren turns his attention to his contemporary, his former friend's widow. "That I simply stole Robert's work and left him with nothing?" "You took everything," Vanessa says, her voice vibrating with decades of controlled rage. "His ideas, his future, his health." "I offered him partnership," Warren interrupts. "Equal credit, equal profit sharing, equal risk." He refused. Because he wouldn't compromise on the community-centered approach, Vanessa fires back. "You wanted to monetize what was meant to be accessible to everyone." "I wanted sustainability," Warren argues. "Robert's vision was brilliant but financially naive. The modifications I made created a profitable model that has housed thousands. At prices that excluded the very communities he designed it for," Autumn points out. Warren regards her with newfound respect, as though truly seeing her for the first time. "Yes. That was our fundamental disagreement. Robert believed housing was a right that should transcend profit margins. I believed, still believe, that sustainable change requires sustainable business models. So you stole his work rather than continue the debate, Jackson says flatly. I protected an idea that would have died with Robert's idealism, Warren counters. Was it ethical? Perhaps not by your generation's standards. Was it effective? Undeniably. The conversation circles the heart of their shared history, revelations and justifications flowing like the tide visible through the windows. As sunset bathes the room in golden light, the final piece of the puzzle emerges, Warren's complex motivations blending genuine belief in his approach with ruthless ambition, Vanessa's decades-long plan for her daughter to reclaim her father's legacy, the web of guilt and obligation that has connected their family since Robert Reynolds' untimely death. In this room of reckoning, as past and present collide, Autumn and Jackson stand together, united despite history, determined to forge a future that honors what came before while refusing to perpetuate its mistakes. The path forward remains uncertain, but for the first time, all their cards are on the table, all secrets exposed to the fading light. Chapter 5. You speak of effectiveness as if it justifies everything, Autumn says, her voice steady despite the anger coursing through her. What about my father's death? Was that an effective outcome too? The accusation hangs in the air, sharp and dangerous. For the first time, Warren's composure wavers, a shadow crossing his face before he masters it. Robert's heart condition was genetic, he says carefully. His father died young of the same ailment. Exacerbated by stress, Vanessa interjects. The stress of watching his life's work stolen, of fighting a legal battle he couldn't afford against a man with unlimited resources, of seeing his name erased from his own creation. I never intended, Warren begins, but Jackson cuts him off. Intentions don't matter when the consequences are so devastating, he says. A man died, Dad. A brilliant creator lost his life, and his widow and daughter lost their future security. Security I provided, Warren counters, gesturing toward Autumn. Harvard undergraduate, Yale Law, the finest education money could buy. Blood money, Autumn says quietly. Conscience payments that never addressed the actual wrong. The room falls silent as Warren moves to the window, his reflection superimposed against the darkening ocean beyond. For a moment, he looks older, the weight of decades of justifications visible in the slope of his shoulders. Your father was my best friend, he says finally, his voice softer than before. From our first day at MIT, two ambitious boys from different worlds who shared a vision for changing how people live. He was brilliant, more brilliant than me, if I'm honest. But brilliance without practicality rarely succeeds in this world. So you made his vision practical, by removing the community affordability component that was its heart, Jackson summarizes. I made it viable, Warren insists. The original concept was beautiful but financially unsustainable. The modifications I made allowed the core technology to survive and evolve. While excluding the very people it was designed to help, Autumn points out. Black and brown communities, low-income families, the populations facing housing instability that my father grew up witnessing. Warren turns back to face them, his expression unreadable. Not immediately. The initial developments were mixed income, just as Robert envisioned. But investors wanted faster returns, board members pushed for luxury applications, and gradually. You compromised his vision into oblivion, Vanessa finishes. Until nothing remained of Robert's original intent. Until Montgomery Enterprises became what it is today, Jackson adds, a company that demolishes historic black neighborhoods to build luxury condos that none of the displaced residents can afford. Warren's gaze hardens at his son's criticism. A company that employs thousands, that has built housing for millions, that has made our family name synonymous with quality and innovation. A legacy built on theft, Autumn says simply. The accusation lands like a physical blow. Warren's shoulders stiffen, but instead of the defensive rebuttal they expect, he moves to a locked cabinet near his desk, removing a thick folder bound with aged leather. Robert's original drawings, he says, placing the portfolio on the desk between them. Every concept, every iteration, every margin note. I've kept them all these years. Autumn reaches for the folder with trembling hands, opening it to reveal pages of technical sketches in her father's distinctive style, the same precise line work she remembers from childhood, watching him at his drafting table. The date stamps show a progression from conceptual sketches to detailed architectural plans, culminating in the comprehensive housing system that would eventually become Montgomery Enterprises' flagship product. "Why keep these?" she asks, confusion evident in her voice. "If you were determined to erase his contribution, why preserve the evidence?" "Because erasure was never my intent," Warren says, an edge of defensiveness entering his tone. "I always planned to acknowledge Robert's role, to bring him in as partner once we proved the concept commercially viable. But he was stubborn, unwilling to compromise even temporarily on his ideals. So instead of respecting his principles, you filed patents behind his back," Jackson says. "You betrayed his trust rather than continuing the debate as equals." Warren doesn't deny it. Business opportunities have windows. Waiting for Robert to come around meant risking the entire venture. "At least be honest about your motivations," Vanessa challenges, her voice cutting through his justifications. "You wanted the glory, the recognition, the wealth that would come from pioneering a new housing paradigm. You weren't willing to share that with a black engineer whose vision exceeded yours." The accusation of racism lands heavily in the elegant room. Warren's face flushes with anger or shame, perhaps both. I never," he sputters, before collecting himself. "Robert's race had nothing to do with my decisions." "Maybe not consciously," Autumn says. "But would you have so easily dismissed a white colleague's concerns about community access? Would you have so readily pushed aside their ethical considerations as naive idealism?" Warren has no immediate answer, and in his silence, Autumn sees a glimmer of genuine reflection, perhaps the first honest self-assessment he's undertaken in decades. "What happened after you filed the patents?" Jackson asks, pressing into the uncomfortable silence. "When Dad confronted you about the betrayal?" Warren sinks heavily into his chair, the practiced poise of the powerful businessman giving way to the weariness of an old man confronting his past. "He threatened legal action, of course. Had every right to. I offered settlement, partnership, compromise, anything to avoid public confrontation that would damage us both. But he refused," Vanessa says. "He was prepared to fight, to prove his authorship, to reclaim what was rightfully his." Warren nods slowly. Robert always did have more principle than pragmatism. He assembled evidence, found witnesses who had seen the original designs, even secured pro bono legal representation from a civil rights firm interested in the racial dynamics of the case. "And then he died," Autumn says flatly. "How convenient for you." The accusation hangs in the air, its implication too terrible to voice directly. Warren's head snaps up, genuine horror crossing his features. "You can't possibly think," he begins, then stops, shaking his head vehemently. "Robert's death was a tragedy, a devastating loss. I would never, could never." "But you benefited from it," Jackson points out, his expression troubled as he watches his father's distress. "With Robert gone, there was no one withstanding to challenge the patents." "Except his widow," Vanessa interjects. "I had his notes, his original drawings, his correspondence documenting the theft. I could have continued his fight." Autumn turns to her mother in confusion. "But you didn't." "Why?" "Because Warren made me an offer the day after your father's funeral," Vanessa says, her gaze never leaving Warren's face. "Do you remember what you said to me, Warren? In my kitchen, while my 7-year-old daughter slept upstairs?" Warren closes his eyes briefly, the memory clearly painful. "I said that fighting would destroy us both, drain resources Autumn would need, and ultimately change nothing about Robert's death. And then you offered me a choice," Vanessa continues, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath. Public battle that would likely bankrupt me given your resources, or private compensation that would secure Autumn's future. The trust fund, Autumn realizes aloud. Education for the daughter in exchange for silence from the mother. It wasn't hush money, Warren insists. It was attempting to make right what couldn't be undone. Robert deserved credit, recognition, profit sharing, all things he could no longer receive. Ensuring his daughter's success seemed the best alternative. While protecting your reputation and business interests, Jackson adds skeptically. Yes, Warren admits without pretense. Both things could be true, Jackson. I could genuinely want to help Robert's daughter while also protecting what I had built. Built on stolen foundation, Autumn reminds him. Warren doesn't dispute this. The irony that his daughter would use the education I funded to become my most effective opponent did not escape me, he says, with a hint of his former confidence. Vanessa's revenge was more elegant and patient than anything I could have anticipated. It wasn't revenge, Vanessa corrects him. It was justice. The long game when immediate justice wasn't possible. She turns to her daughter, something like pride mixing with regret in her expression. I couldn't reclaim Robert's legacy directly, but I could equip you to carry it forward, to fight for the communities your father wanted to help, to use your position to challenge those who exploit them. The revelation strikes Autumn with complex emotion, pride in her mother's strategic resilience, grief for what might have been had her father lived, anger at the choices made without her knowledge or consent. I became a pawn in a decades-long chess match between you, she says, looking between Warren and her mother. Neither of you considered that I deserved to know the truth, to make my own informed choices about how to honor my father's legacy. I was protecting you, Vanessa starts, but Autumn shakes her head. You were controlling me, she corrects gently. Just as Warren controlled my father's narrative. Different intentions, similar methods. The observation lands heavily in the room. Neither of the older generation immediately disputes it. Jackson, who has been examining the portfolio of drawings while listening, suddenly straightens. Look at this, he says, extracting a particular sketch from the collection. This design element, it's nearly identical to what we've been developing for the Roxbury project. Autumn moves to his side, studying the drawing, her father's distinctive style showing an innovative community space design that does indeed mirror their current work. Great minds think alike, Warren observes. Or perhaps more accurately, the son is unconsciously completing what his father started. Jackson's expression shifts as he processes this connection, this thread linking him to his father's past, to the man his father betrayed, to Autumn. All this time, he says quietly, I thought I was forging my own path, creating something entirely new. You were, Autumn assures him. But perhaps with echoes of something that came before, something in your blood or your subconscious. Something that connects us, Jackson realizes, meeting her eyes. Even before we met, we were linked by this history, this shared creative lineage. The moment between them is interrupted by Warren's sudden coughing fit, harsh, racking sounds that bend him double. Vanessa, doctor's instincts overriding personal animosity, moves immediately to his side, checking his pulse with professional detachment. Your heart, she says, not a question but a diagnosis. How long has it been failing? Warren waves away her concern, though his pallor suggests she's correct. Poetic justice, isn't it? The same condition that took Robert, coming for me 20 years later. Dad? Jackson's voice holds alarm, personal revelations temporarily set aside in the face of immediate concern. What aren't you telling me? Terminal cardiac myopathy, Warren admits with clinical detachment. 6 months, perhaps a year with aggressive treatment. Which is why this conversation is happening now, rather than continuing our comfortable patterns of avoidance and denial. The revelation shifts the energy in the room. Urgent confrontation giving way to something more complex, a reckoning shadowed by mortality's looming presence. You're dying, Autumn says, the simple truth landing with unexpected impact. We all are, Warren replies with grim humor. Some of us just have more precise timetables. Why tell us now? Jackson demands. Why bring us all together after decades of silence? Warren straightens in his chair, gathering his remaining dignity. Because legacies matter, Jackson. What we leave behind matters. And I find myself. He pauses, seeming to search for words foreign to his vocabulary, regretful about certain aspects of mine. Regretful, Vanessa repeats, the word clearly insufficient in her estimation. 20 years too late. Perhaps, Warren acknowledges. But not too late for them. He gestures to Jackson and Autumn. Not too late for Robert's vision to be realized through them, with the resources I can provide. Autumn feels a surge of anger at this convenient redemption narrative. You think leaving money in your will makes up for what you did? That funding our project absolves your conscience? I think nothing can change the past, Warren says simply. But the future remains unwritten. Your Roxbury project, it's essentially what Robert envisioned from the beginning. Affordable, community-centered housing with innovative design elements that maximize both space and human connection. The project you've been obstructing through your corporate proxies, Jackson points out. A negotiating position, nothing more, Warren dismisses. I need to know you're both fully committed before removing those obstacles and providing the funding necessary for true scale. The manipulation is so transparent that Autumn almost laughs. Even dying, you can't help playing puppet master, she observes. Creating obstacles for us to overcome, tests to pass before you bestow your blessing. Warren doesn't deny it. Old habits, he says with a shrug that triggers another, milder cough. But my offer stands regardless. Montgomery Enterprises will withdraw opposition to your project and provide matching funds for community ownership stakes, if that's what you both want. If that's what we both want, Jackson repeats, the condition not lost on him. He turns to Autumn, their earlier connection now complicated by this new revelation. He's trying to force our partnership, professional and personal. Using my father's legacy as leverage, Autumn agrees, anger simmering beneath her measured tone. Some things never change. Warren watches them with calculating eyes, even as his physical strength visibly ebbs. Call it manipulation if you must. I prefer to think of it as aligning incentives for mutual benefit. You get funding and institutional support, I get the satisfaction of seeing Robert's vision finally realized, and by our children, no less. A fitting completion to our complicated story. Our story isn't yours to complete, Autumn says firmly. Whatever happens between Jackson and me, professionally or personally, will be our choice, not your final manipulation from beyond the grave. The statement lands with quiet power, asserting independence from the narrative Warren has tried to control for decades. In the silence that follows, as twilight deepens outside the grand windows, the four individuals, connected by history, betrayal, ambition, and blood, face a crossroads that will determine not just a business outcome, but the shape of their intertwined legacies. The confrontation in the library stretches for nearly 2 hours, the sounds of the gala continuing distantly beyond the closed doors. By the time they emerge, Warren leaning more heavily on his cane than when they entered, the four of them have reached an uneasy understanding, not reconciliation, not forgiveness, but a fragile framework for moving forward. Autumn finds herself emotionally exhausted, the weight of revelations pressing against her chest as she steps onto the terrace for air. The night has fully descended, stars emerging above the dark Atlantic waters. Behind her, the gala continues in golden light and practiced laughter, the wealthy and powerful unaware of the seismic shifts that have occurred in the library. There you are, Jackson's voice comes from behind her. Are you okay? She doesn't turn immediately, gathering her composure before facing him. Defining okay seems complicated right now. He joins her at the railing, respecting her space while offering his presence. That's fair. It's a lot to process. My entire life has been shaped by decisions I knew nothing about, Autumn says after a moment. My education, my career path, even my meeting you, all orchestrated by others playing a decades-long game of chess. Does that change how you feel about any of it? Jackson asks carefully. About your accomplishments? About us? The question cuts to the heart of her turmoil. Autumn turns to study his face in the dim light, searching for Warren's calculation in his features and finding instead only genuine concern. I don't know, she admits. Everything feels tainted somehow. My mother using Warren's money to raise me as a weapon against him. Warren trying to orchestrate our relationship as his final act of control. She pauses, struggling to articulate the hollowness in her chest. Where's the authenticity in any of it? What parts of my life are actually mine? Jackson absorbs her words, giving them the weight they deserve before responding. I understand feeling manipulated. But consider this, your choices, your passion for justice, your determination to help underserved communities, those are authentically yours, regardless of how they were funded or fostered. And us? Autumn challenges, needing honesty more than comfort. This connection between us that seemed so unexpected, so genuine, how much of that was just our parents' unfinished business working itself out through us? The question hangs between them, weighty with implication. Jackson takes a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I can't speak for cosmic patterns or psychological inheritance, he says carefully. But I know that what I feel for you, the respect that became admiration, the attraction that grew despite our professional conflicts, that's real, Autumn. That's mine, not my father's manipulation or some predetermined pattern. She wants to believe him, wants to trust the sincerity in his voice and eyes. But doubts creep in, thorny and persistent. How can we know for sure, she asks. How can we separate ourselves from this history that's been hidden from us until now? Maybe we can't entirely, Jackson acknowledges. But we can choose how we respond to it. We can accept that our paths crossed because of our parents' history while insisting that what happens next is entirely our choice. Before Autumn can respond, the terrace door opens behind them, spilling light and conversation into their private moment. Warren appears, Vanessa close behind him with professional concern evident in her posture. I've made my position clear, Warren says without preamble. The choice now belongs to both of you. Montgomery Enterprises will honor whatever decision you make regarding the Roxbury project, partnership or separation. How generous of you to finally allow others agency, Vanessa comments, her tone dry but lacking its earlier bitterness. Warren accepts the barb with uncharacteristic grace. Age and mortality bring clarity, if not redemption, he says. Perhaps you'll discover that yourself someday, Vanessa. The comment might once have provoked fresh hostility, but tonight Vanessa merely inclines her head slightly, professional detachment masking whatever emotions stir beneath. We should return to Boston, she says to Autumn. It's getting late, and we've all had enough revelations for one evening. The suggestion of departure forces a decision Autumn isn't ready to make. She looks between Jackson and her mother, past and future pulling her in opposite directions. I'll take a cab back later, she tells Vanessa after a moment. Jackson and I have more to discuss. Something like pride mingles with concern in her mother's eyes, recognition of Autumn asserting independence from both parental influences. Very well. We'll talk tomorrow. As the older generation withdraws, leaving them alone beneath the stars once more, Autumn feels the weight of history and the uncertainty of the future pressing equally upon her shoulders. The revelation of their family's entangled past has both contextualized their connection and threatened its foundation. What happens now, she asks, the question encompassing far more than their immediate plans. Jackson takes her hand, his touch tentative yet grounding. Now we decide what parts of this legacy we accept, what parts we reject, and what we build that's entirely our own. The simplicity of this framework appeals to Autumn's analytical mind, offering structure amid emotional chaos. And us? Where do we fit in that decision? That's the question I can't answer alone, Jackson says quietly. I know what I want. But after everything that's been revealed tonight, I understand if you need distance to sort through it all. His willingness to step back, to prioritize her autonomy over his desires, tells Autumn more about his character than any declaration could. In this moment of offered freedom, she finds sudden clarity about what she truly wants. Chapter 6. The week following the Martha's Vineyard confrontation passes in a blur of professional obligations and emotional processing. Despite their moment of connection on the terrace, Autumn and Jackson mutually agree to a brief period of separation, not from doubt about their feelings, but from recognition that they each need space to integrate the revelations about their family's history into their understanding of themselves and each other. Autumn throws herself into casework, reviewing documents until her eyes burn, as if the complex language of legal contracts might somehow clarify the tangled emotions in her heart. Late one evening, as Boston's financial district empties of its daytime inhabitants, Zoe appears in her office doorway with determined concern etched across her features. "Enough," she announces, dropping a paper bag of takeout on Autumn's desk. "You've been avoiding my calls for 3 days, and according to your assistant, you haven't left this office before midnight all week." Autumn manages a tired smile. "I've been busy." "You've been hiding," Zoe corrects, unwrapping dumplings from her favorite Chinese restaurant. "From Jackson, from your mother, from decisions, maybe even from yourself." The accuracy of this assessment stings. "I need time to process." "Process, yes. Bury yourself in work until you're too exhausted to feel anything?" "No." Zoe pushes a container toward her. "Eat, then talk. Non-negotiable." The familiar ritual of sharing food loosens something in Autumn's chest. Halfway through their meal, the words begin to flow, her confusion about her mother's choices, her uncertainty about feelings that developed under false pretenses, her fear that any decision she makes now is somehow part of Warren Montgomery's orchestration. "So you're what? Going to avoid Jackson forever because his dying father might approve of your relationship?" Zoe asks when she finishes. "That seems like giving Warren even more power over your life." Put that way, the absurdity of her position strikes Autumn with unexpected force. A surprised laugh escapes her, the first genuine one in days. "When you put it that way," she concedes, poking at a dumpling. "I'm not saying jump back into his arms tomorrow," Zoe clarifies. "I'm saying make your decisions based on what you want, not in reaction to what anyone else has done. Including your mother." Across town, Jackson sits with Marcus in the converted warehouse space of their startup headquarters, the city lights of Boston Harbor glittering through the industrial windows. Empty pizza boxes litter the conference table, evidence of another late strategy session. "We need to make this right," Jackson says, staring at the digital mock-up of the community development project. "Not just for Autumn, but for everyone involved. My father built his empire on theft, intellectual and cultural." Marcus leans back in his chair, studying his friend. "This isn't just about business anymore, is it?" Jackson's gaze remains fixed on the screen. "It never was. Not after I met her. And yet you've spent the week redesigning housing complexes instead of calling her." Jackson finally meets his friend's eyes. "What would you have me do? My father stole her father's legacy. Everything I have, my education, my first investors, the connections that helped launch this company, it all traces back to that theft. So what are you going to do about it?" Marcus challenges. "Hide in shame, or make amends?" The question hangs between them, until Jackson straightens, a determined clarity settling over his features. "I'm going to fix what can be fixed," he says, turning back to the computer. "Starting with this." The email arrives in Autumn's inbox at 3:27 a.m., the timestamp revealing that Jackson, too, has been working through the night. The subject line reads simply, "What should have been yours?" Attached is a comprehensive legal document transferring ownership rights of her father's original architectural designs from Montgomery Enterprises to the Reynolds Family Trust, along with a substantial financial settlement accounting for nearly 30 years of profits derived from those designs. Her finger hovers over the delete button, her first instinct to reject anything connected to the Montgomery name, but professional curiosity wins out. As she scrolls through the densely worded document, her lawyer's mind immediately notes its thoroughness. This isn't a symbolic gesture, it's a legally binding admission of theft with concrete reparations. At the bottom of the email is a personal note. Autumn. I can't undo what my father did to yours. But I can ensure that from this day forward, your father's legacy is acknowledged and honored. This transfer is unconditional. Whether you decide to continue our project together or never speak to me again, these rights belong to your family. What we do next is entirely separate. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Jackson. 3 days later, after thorough review with senior partners at her firm, Autumn signs the documents. That afternoon, she walks into the glass-walled conference room where Jackson sits alone reviewing blueprints, his back to the door. The ownership transfer is done, she says, causing him to turn with surprise. Thank you. His eyes, tired but clear, meet hers. It was the right thing to do. Yes, she agrees. But that doesn't make it easy. Or common. A silence stretches between them, laden with unspoken words. Finally, Autumn takes a seat across from him. My mother showed me my father's original journals yesterday, she says. The full plans for what he called community-integrated housing. It was brilliant. Decades ahead of its time. Jackson nods. I've been studying them too, from my father's files. Your father understood something fundamental about architecture as community building, not just structures. Yes. She pulls out a flash drive, sets it on the table between them. I'd like to propose a modified partnership. The Reynolds-Montgomery Foundation for Equitable Development. Using my father's original vision but updated with your technological innovations. His eyes widen slightly. You'd still work with me? With the Montgomery name? Not with your father, she clarifies firmly. And not as a silent partner. Equal control, with profits directed toward scholarships and community development in the neighborhoods he exploited. Jackson studies her face. You're not just reclaiming your father's work. You're transforming it into something even more impactful. Reparative justice, she says simply. It won't undo the past. But it can reshape the future. He extends his hand across the table. Partners? She takes it, the touch sending familiar warmth through her fingers. Partners. 2 weeks later, they meet at the Boston Public Garden, neutral territory away from the charged atmospheres of their respective offices. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the pathways as they walk side by side, close but not touching. The board unanimously approved the foundation structure, Autumn says. Even the most skeptical partners were impressed by the projection models. My father's lawyers have confirmed he won't contest any of the transfers, Jackson adds. Whether that's guilt, pragmatism, or simply declining health, I can't say. They pause by the lagoon, watching a swan boat glide past with laughing children. I've been thinking about something my mother said, Autumn ventures after a moment. That she kept the past secret because she didn't want me defined by it, didn't want my life shaped by bitterness or revenge. Jackson glances at her profile. Do you think she was right? I think. She weighs her words carefully, that she underestimated my capacity to handle truth. But I also think she was protecting herself as much as me. Confronting Warren would have meant reliving the worst period of her life. And what about us? Jackson asks quietly. Were we just pawns in some cosmic game of family justice? Autumn turns to face him fully. Maybe our meeting wasn't random. Maybe there is some pattern to how lives intersect. But what we choose to do with those intersections, that's entirely our own. She takes a deep breath. I was afraid that my feelings for you were somehow contaminated by this shared history. That I couldn't trust them because they formed before I knew the truth. And now? Now I understand that we're not our family's mistakes. We can acknowledge them, address them, even make amends for them. But they don't define who we are or what we can become. Jackson's hand finds hers, tentative at first, then sure. I've missed you. I've missed you too, she admits. Even when I was angry, even when I was confused, I still missed you. So where does this leave us, he asks, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. At the beginning, she says, a small smile forming. But this time, with our eyes open. His free hand rises to cup her cheek. No more secrets between us? No more secrets, she agrees, leaning in as his lips find hers, soft and questioning at first, then with growing certainty. When they part, the setting sun bathes them in golden light, their shadows merged into a single elongated form across the garden path. Partners in every sense, he asks. In every sense, she confirms, her head finding the perfect resting place against his shoulder as they continue their walk, steps aligned, moving forward together. 6 months later. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the first Reynolds Montgomery Foundation housing development draws an unexpectedly large crowd. Community members, press, and corporate sponsors gather in what was once a neglected corner of Roxbury, now transformed into an innovative housing complex with integrated green spaces, technology hubs, and small business incubators. Autumn stands at the podium, composed and professional in a tailored burgundy suit, her voice strong as she addresses the assembly. Today marks not just the opening of a building, but the realization of a vision, one conceived by my father 30 years ago, refined through collaboration, and finally brought to life through community partnership. From his position at the side of the stage, Jackson watches her with undisguised admiration. Nearby, seated in the front row, Vanessa Reynolds maintains her dignity despite the emotional weight of the occasion. 2 seats away. Close enough for civility but distant enough to acknowledge lingering tensions, Warren Montgomery sits in his wheelchair, visibly frilier than 6 months ago, but present nonetheless. Architecture is never merely about structures, Autumn continues. It's about creating spaces where lives unfold, where communities strengthen, where futures are built. This project represents our commitment to ensuring those futures are equitable, sustainable, and just. As she yields the stage to community representatives, she catches Jackson's eye, and a private smile passes between them, one that speaks of pride in their professional accomplishment and joy in their personal connection. Later, at the reception, Vanessa approaches Warren for the first time since Martha's Vineyard. Their conversation is brief, civil, weighted with history but not hostility. Whatever passes between them remains private, but when Autumn glances over, she sees her mother's hand briefly rest on Warren's shoulder. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but acknowledgement of shared humanity. Progress? Jackson asks, following her gaze as he hands her a glass of champagne. Of a sort, she agrees. Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become less painful with time. Speaking of time, he says, subtly guiding her toward a quieter corner of the reception, I've been thinking about ours. Something in his tone makes her heart quicken. Oh. These past 6 months working together, building this foundation, reshaping our family's legacies. He takes both her hands in his. It's been the most challenging and rewarding period of my life. She smiles. Mine too. And I know we agreed to take things slowly, to build our relationship alongside our work, he continues, but I've realized something important. What's that? That I don't want separate tracks anymore, professional partners by day, personal relationship whenever we can fit it in. I want integration, like your father's housing designs. A life where all parts work in harmony. He reaches into his pocket, withdraws a small box that makes her breath catch. Inside is not a ring, as she momentarily expected, but an antique key. My lease is up next month, he explains. And I thought, Rather than renewing or finding a new place alone, maybe we could find somewhere together. Somewhere that's just ours, with no family history attached. Tears prick her eyes as she takes the symbolic key. Are you asking me to move in with you, Jackson Montgomery? I'm asking us to build a home together, he clarifies. Not just walls and a roof, but a place where we create our own legacy, defined by our choices, not our inheritances. Her answer comes without hesitation, as natural as breathing. Yes. As they rejoin the celebration, Autumn feels the weight of the key in her pocket, not a burden, but a promise. Looking around at what they've created, a project that honors her father's vision while forging something entirely new. She understands that sometimes the most beautiful structures rise from complicated foundations. Zoe catches her eye from across the room and raises her glass in silent toast, having witnessed the private moment. Marcus claps Jackson on the shoulder as they pass, his expression suggesting he too understands something significant has transpired. In this moment, surrounded by the physical manifestation of reconciliation and possibility, Autumn realizes that the journey from bitter rivals to partners in every sense was never about forgetting the past, but about transforming it, taking what was broken and creating something stronger at the mended places. As Jackson's hand finds the small of her back, steady and supportive, she leans slightly into his touch, no longer afraid that their connection diminishes her independence but understanding now that the right partnership multiplies strength rather than dividing it. Together, they step forward into the future they are building. Word by word, brick by brick, day by day, a future neither of them could have imagined when their story began.